Very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us today for the ISAS seminar titled The China Factor in Indo-US Engagement. The seminar will explore the shared interest of both India and US in balancing China and how this dynamic shapes the course of their relationship. To speak on this today, we are delighted to have with us as guest speaker Dr. Atul Bharadwaj, Fellow at the Prime Minister Museum and Library, New Delhi, India. The session will be chaired by Dr. Amit Ranjan, who's a research fellow at the Institute of South Asian Studies at the National University of Singapore. And today's session will be live streamed on the ISAS Facebook page. I shall now invite Dr. Ranjan to start the session.
Thanks, Raghav. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, sir. Thank you. China has been the major factor in the India-US engagement in the last few years. However, a major question is for whom this engagement is beneficial, India or the USA. Despite China's spread in South Asia, India has a big presence in the region. Nevertheless, Beijing's growing footprints always worries New Delhi. One of the reasons why India joined hands with the USA and other Quad members is to check the increasing Chinese challenge in Asia and South Asia in particular. But growing presence of the USA may contract India's influence in South Asia. With this preliminary remarks, I would like Dr. Atul to make his presentation.
Thank you so much, Dr. Amit, and thank you so much to the Institute of South Asian Studies for inviting me to share my views on this particular issue. I'd done a book on India-America relations from 42 to 62, and I named it was the relationship is basically rooted in the liberal international order. So there I had basically looked at the archival material, which had talked about primarily in the Nehruvian era, we could say, what was the Indo-American relations in that particular era. So that book was published, of course, in 2019, so that is one of my pet projects. I always keep looking at more material on that particular issue, and China was the factor then, and China remains the factor now in the Indo-US relationship. And how US basically deals with India also depends a lot on its experiences of dealing with a large country like China. So one example I would like to give here is that a lot of people, this is from the history, I'm just, So one example to begin with I would like to give here is that, why didn't America come close to India, in the 50s during the Nehruvian era? It's not that the Indian elite was averse to America at that stage, nor was Nehru really averse to America at that stage, to be very frank. America didn't want India to look like basically Philippines or Pakistan, to be precise. When America had lost China basically to the Communist Party of China, it was always very there was a lobby in America which talked about loss of China, which loss of China was a big issue in the 1950s in America. And there was a big lobby in China which said that you lost it because Chiang Kai-shek looked to be very close to China at that stage. So that experience America carried to India, and it didn't want Nehru to look like another Chiang Kai-shek primarily. It didn't look, and Nehru also, of course, didn't want to look like a Chiang Kai-shek because India was too big. India was coming out of the Western sort of hegemony and Western empire. It had broken out. It could not associate itself with America, another Western power, which was emerging power at that stage. So therefore, it was natural for both the parties, America's experiences in China, of losing China, and Nehru's experiences of coming out of the British Empire. So he could not have his entire politics was built on nationalism, and had he come closer to America at that time, he would have looked like another Western ally basically, which he could not afford to, nor could America afford to make India look like Pakistan or Philippines for that matter. So it was in mutual interest that both kept apart, yet both were ideologically aligned, because both were ideologically aligned in the sense that they said that we belong to the liberal international order. Nehru was committed to the liberal international order, which China had created, or which America had created post-war. So that was the basic premise of this relationship, which we'll come to it later. Now, of course, and one another thing I would like to, I for one argue that it is not India that distanced itself from America. Lot of, and most of the commentaries you'll hear, the narrative that you hear is basically built on the fact that India went away from America. It was not India which went away from America. India was always close. India was always eager to be with America. It is America which sort of, left us in the 60s, during the Lyndon Johnson period, basically, after Kennedy's death. They started chasing China. And their basic strategy was to create the Sino-Soviet split. And so they started this. Indira Gandhi, for that matter, when she came to power in 1966, the first country she visited was America. And that's largely because we were expecting a World Bank loan. The World Bank asked us to devalue our currency in 1966. Indira Gandhi agreed to that devaluation of that currency. The World Bank, of course, did not give us a loan that they had promised. And so they started distancing because they were more interested in China and they did not want, to look closer to India at that stage. So that was the basic premise on which I won't be discussing that. But if you see on the economic front, the kind of engagement our Indian Planning Commission had from the 1950s onwards with the Americans, and with whether it was the Ford Foundation's involvement in an Indian Planning Commission from the 1950 onwards was humongous, and that's how the whole road was paved for the economic liberalization in the 90s, which happened. So we were very deeply engaged with America on the economic front. It is only in a very brief period in the 70s that we looked apart. But by and large, our elite basically has always been ideologically aligned to the West. Even now, when our foreign minister says that India is, not anti-West, we are non-West. So we've never been anti-West in that sense, I would say. Our relationship with the Soviet Union, of course, our relationship with Soviet Union was tactical, I would say, because we had no option. America had gone with China. America was close to Pakistan. Since there was no other option left with us, we had to perforce go to Soviet Union. So that was a broader, international politics, how it played out. Yet we always remained close to, we were always eager, because I was in the Navy, say in the 80s and the 90s when I experienced. We started taking a lot of equipment from the Soviet Union at that time in the 70s and 80s, the naval equipment largely. But if you see actually, even at that stage, there was always a very strong sentiment within the Navy, within the naval leadership, that the West is better. The valve technology of the Soviet Union is a little inferior to the Western technology, which is in the ships and all that. So that was always the thing. The books that we read, I would say, as a young officer, the book that I consulted was basically the US Naval Proceedings, the Naval Dispatch, which was published in Britain. And so these were largely, and our culture, entire service culture was shaped on the Western lines primarily because of the past. So with that background, basically, we had no option but to go. So, but now we are in a very tight embrace with the Americans, and so there is no longer, what Dennis Cook had said in the 90s, that we are estranged. We are no longer estranged. We are in a tight embrace. We are not saying that we are, unlike in the Nehru era avoided saying that we are non-aligned. Now we are saying we are multi-aligned. We may not be aligned with America as such. On paper, there is no alliance, but there is a quasi-alliance between India and America. That is my argument. And the argument is basically because alliances are based on military arrangements. We do not have an official military arrangement, but we are definitely, very, very intimately linked with our two militaries are very intimately linked now. So therefore, I would say that we are quasi. There is a quasi alliance between the two now, and so we are not non-aligned, of course. And we in Indian foreign policy establishment, that term is also not really liked anymore. We call ourselves multi-aligned. So as I said, we can't compare this particular relationship with the relationship which we had with the Soviet Union, because that was more tactical. I would say the elite, involvement of the elite in ideological terms was very minimal in that relationship. But this particular relationship, we are sort of ideologically aligned. We have a common enemy now. So I would say that, in 70s, India declared Indian Ocean to be a zone of peace. Now, some would say that is basically to deny, American entry into the Indian Ocean, the American nuclear ships entry into the Indian Ocean. But we could hardly, change the direction of the American ships. We were not that powerful. But what we could achieve by stating that Indian Ocean has to be a zone of peace was, we could always say that the Soviet Union, whom we had got close to, they expected some, to be present in Visakhapatnam and other. So by declaring a zone of peace, we could tell the Soviet Union that we don't want your nuclear assets to come here. So that was a part, that was a kind of a non-alignment that we practiced even in that stage. So it didn't have, our making Indian Ocean a zone of peace did not impact America as such, but it did impact Soviet Union, which could not then, which was seeking a base in Visakhapatnam. So with that, I would say that we have now evolved a relationship. This relationship, economics, in terms of economics, we were always close to America, barring a brief period from the 70s towards the 80s. In the 80s, again, we got an IMF loan of $6 billion, which was the highest loan by any country at that stage. So there was this economics, and the entire economic elite in India was actually very, very, intimately linked to the World Bank, to the Ford Foundations, and to the American think tanks, other think tanks. So there was always an engagement, and that's how we could actually, we could actually become a part of the Washington consensus in the 90s, with which the process, in fact, started in the mid 80s with Rajiv Gandhi's, government. So this is the, and now when we say this, that there is no corner of human enterprise is untouched by the partnership between our two great countries, that is India and America, which spans seas to stars. This is the from the Biden-Modi statement, which was issued in June 23. So this is the extent of the relationship which exists now. So why India needs? The next question that we must ask is why India needs America and why America needs India. So that is the basic question that any analyst would ask. So according to me, one, of course, the biggest factor is the China factor. The China, and there are a lot of analysts who now say that India, China, and US triangle is at the core of the 21st century global geopolitics, and which is actually being played in the Indo-Pacific region. And China is definitely closing the gap with the US. And of course, it is becoming a dominant power. And US wants to preserve its primacy in global affairs. So that is the context. And India doesn't want China to, India would like China contained, because China, if it becomes too big, is already a problem for India, and it could be a further problem for India as well. So this China is the one factor. But another factor which is very important is, China will come to later, is the national interest, basically. So India, basically, there is a broad consensus in India that America is going to stay as the primary power in global affairs. It is going to dominate the global political economy for next, in this entire century. And if India has to become great, it needs America with it. India cannot become great at the moment without the American support and without the American sort of collaboration. And why India needs to collaborate with America is because India needs technology. So I was at IDSA in 2000, I would say 2002, and there was a study conducted by Pentagon, and Booz Allen was a company which was given that was commissioned to basically conduct that. So I remember a lady coming, Julia, I don't remember the exact name. So she had come in 2002, and she interviewed a lot of Indian, military elite, Indian foreign policy elite, and the bureaucrats. And the basic the conclusion that that Booz Allen came to was that the Indian elite did not trust America because America was not able to give it the kind of technology that it needed. India did not trust America because Americans always denied them the technology, the best kind of equipment that they were giving to their partners, NATO partners. So this is broadly what the Indians wanted even then. And now this need has become more because as India has risen further, India has become more powerful now over the past 10 years. And India's clout has grown more in the international fora. India feels that now is the time for it to become a power that can make its own military equipment. Now, that own military equipment cannot be made. It'll take longer time if we were to start thinking of making it on our own, absolutely exclusively with our own capabilities. So we need to collaborate like any other power collaborates. We also want to collaborate. So America, we feel, is our best bet to rise higher than where we are at the moment. China, of course, is the other power, but we do not want to align with China in any case because we see it as a threat. There is an ongoing border issue with China. So therefore, this is largely, there's a broad consensus now amongst both the parties. We recently had an article by Raja Mohan in Indian Express where he talked about both the Congress and the BJP talk in unison about being, about their American policy. Of course, for political reasons, they keep pinpricking each other on the China policy. But by and large, on American policy, everybody is clear, barring a few, Communist Party, which is little irrelevant now. So therefore, if you see, there is this India is now feeling, and India is getting some rewards. Earlier, what had happened was that immediately after, when 2008, this whole process started with Obama administration when it announced the pivot to Asia. India also then started coming closer to America because Americans then started building up its allies in the Indo-Pacific region. And India was always willing. We were waiting. Our navies had been collaborating with each other since the end of the Cold War. The Malabar exercise had started in the mid-50s. In the mid-90s. And so there was this constant process which was going on. So therefore, the ease with which we got into the Quad became very simple. Although officially it has not been announced as a military alliance, but yet everybody knows that the alliance is primarily built to ensure the freedom of navigation and to ensure basically to contain China in the Indo-Pacific region. This is with this in mind. So India started but India has got, as I said, from America. India has launched an initiative on critical and emerging technologies with America. The Indian Science and Technology Endowment Fund has been created. So there are a lot of initiatives which are just which supports and fosters joint applied R&D to generate public good through commercialization of technology. So there is a lot happening in those fields. And then you have in space cooperation between India and America is again on the rise. NASA and ISRO are collaborating to develop a strategic framework for human space flight. Even, private players are collaborating between the two countries in this particular arena of the space. Then semiconductors, which is another big thing now. India and America are collaborating. The American company Micron has collaborated with the Indian state and the central government to create that kind of factories for semiconductors. And so we are collaborating in almost all engineering field, including the artificial intelligence, telecommunications. Again, on 5G and 6G, there is a collaboration happening. Artificial intelligence, I mentioned. So India Sterlite Technologies has invested 100 billion in construction of an optical fiber cable manufacturing unit near Columbia, South Carolina. So India is also investing money in America as a part of the collaborative effort. Similarly, 140 million in-kind contribution from Indian Department of Atomic Energy to the US Department of Energy has been made. And biotechnology, biomanufacturing are the other fields. So these are the emerging technologies in which both the countries are deeply, deeply engaged with each other. Now the question is what America wants. I'll have some water now. America wants a lot from India, of course. And one thing is, of course, the China, which is there. So the from the very beginning, as 2002 onwards, military was the focus, as I said, of America, for America in India. And, trade took a backseat, but the both started aligning. As I said, the first was, of course, the naval engagements, and later the America said, if this alliance or if this partnership has to be strengthened, then this partnership must be based on some basic agreements. So these were known as the 4 foundational basic agreements. 2002 was the first. The General Security of Military Information Agreement was signed, which was a very basic thing. 2016 onwards, then it further took off when the Quad started materializing a little bit more, and the Logistic Exchange Memorandum of Agreement was signed, LEMOA. It became controversial then because the left at that time said that this would lead to the American entry into India, and it'll impact our strategic autonomy, and all those issues came up during this stage. And then onwards, 2018, they signed another agreement, Communication Compatibility and Security Arrangement Agreement, and the Basic Exchange and Cooperation Agreement for Geospatial Cooperation. So all these agreements basically are designed for creating an interoperable environment between the two militaries. What happens is when the two militaries interact, and when they do exercises together, or even if in the future if they are going to be an operational environment, the two militaries should be able to communicate with each other better. Their equipment should be able to communicate with each other better, and so for that matter, in that context, if you see, the American arms sales to India have also gone up considerably now. America now gives us about 12% of our arms import, and gradually our arms import from Russia has reduced. It was earlier 75%, now it is about 40%. And America now gives us about arms worth of $20 billion. So this process is increasing, and there are a lot of export control regulations which America has sort of removed to enable the transfer of these technologies to India. So these 4 is basically designed for interoperability. Other thing which America, so now recently the Indo-US defense acceleration ecosystem has been formed where industrial cooperation will happen. This was another area that India wanted. We don't want to buy from America. We want America to come and give us the technology so that we can build on our own. So that process is also started, and America has sort of agreed to that demand of India also. But India in turn has also agreed to some demands. So India has elevation to strategic trade authorization, allows it to import high-end sensitive technologies like armed drones from the US. Then GE Aerospace and Hindustan Aeronautic Limited are jointly now manufacturing. This is an important thing, which is most important, that they're now jointly manufacturing the F414 jet engines in India. So this is a huge development for India, because India as such has been lacking this engine development part, the indigenization, the Atmanirbhar Bharat, the initiative which is there, that is the indigenization initiative which the Prime Minister has launched, was sort of was not able to take off. But with these kind of developments, it is likely to take off. If we start building our own aircraft, that would be a massive achievement, for India's indigenization program in that sense. The Americans wanted, which was the logistic agreement which they had formed, and one aspect of that was that they wanted this master ship repair agreement, which is again supported by that LEMOA, and it is between the Indian shipyards and the US Navy. So this basically allows American vessels to undertake repair at the following shipyards. They've signed agreements with these shipyards: Mazagon Dock Limited, Goa Shipyard, Larsen and Toubro, and Cochin Shipyard also has been included. So with these now, the American ships which are operating in the Indo-Pacific region, for their repair and repairs, they can come to these shipyards, and they have a contract, and so they don't have to go through the red tape. They can just directly interact with the shipyards and now come and get their repairs done. So this is a huge development. Even we've signed this with the British also. The British Navy has also signed with many of the shipyards now. So this is a big development which is happening in our shipyards. That the foreign navies would come and get themselves repaired, go, and and we would definitely earn some money on this. So the ultimate goal of Americans is to make India a logistic hub for US and other partners in the Indo-Pacific region. A defense official told Naval Technology India. So this is basically it. Because this is of course cost effective for the Americans. They do have these arrangements in Japan, but there are limitations in Japan. It's not as cost effective as it would be in India. And India has now the infrastructure available. India is developing the infrastructure in its ports. That is the Sagarmala scheme. So it is bearing results in that sense. So both India and America are getting a lot from each other. It's not that just the America is giving us and we are not giving it to America. America wants India to be a logistic hub where its ships can be taken care of, where its forces which are operating in the region can be taken care of. And of course, in any China containment policy, this is very, very essential for the American military planners. India, of course, wants technology, wants to grow further, wants to become a great power, and America is aiding it, as it had started aiding it in 2008 when Bush and Manmohan Singh signed the civil nuclear deal agreement. So a lot of people say that nothing much has happened on the terms of nuclear, but that was the basic foundation for the relationship, I think, to take off. From there on, the relationship is catapulted to a next stage. And it is likely to remain there because China is not going away anywhere. America will definitely contest its rise, and it needs allies, and India is one of the most important allies in the region. Of course, during the Cold War, Pakistan was an important ally for America, but the relationship with Pakistan was not as intimate as it has to be with India, because India is a big power, growing power. It is not as small as Pakistan. So therefore, the way the Americans are dealing with Indians will also be different. Now, China is a factor. China was always a factor, as I started this talk with. And when I did my book, I always thought that America had a first mover advantage in India. A lot of our historical narrative is, based on the fact that the Soviet Union influenced India more. But when I did my archival studies, I found that much before the Soviet Union. It was the Americans who were present here. So in 1942, there were about 200,000 American soldiers who came to India. And the British invited them. And they trained about 100,000 Chinese soldiers in India from 1942 to 46. The Americans built a road from Assam right up to Kunming, and also an oil pipeline from that region. Because India at that time during the war, Second World War, was a logistic hub, basically, primarily. The American militaries, and there are a lot of contributions, which, like the Safdarjung Hospital, if you see in India, was built by the American military engineers. Similarly, there were many other infrastructure developments in Calcutta, if you see, and other places, if you see. And they were also, part of our transfer of power, negotiations with the British. From the first Cripps mission to, of course, the cabinet mission plan in 1946, the American representatives were deeply involved in that entire process because they were the emerging power. Even Britain was dependent on their finance. The entire war was being fought with the American finance, and therefore it was natural, for them to involve. And America was expanding at that stage, and it was, it did not really like the European empire. And they wanted the end to the European empire. So they, in a way, they assisted us. So this China factor then comes in. Of course, there are a lot of people who then say that Nehru took an independent, stance in terms of China in early 50s by recognizing China. But if you look deeper into the history, you would find that there was a sort of a strategic tacit understanding between America and Britain in the early 50s on the China factor. Americans, of course, were busy in Korea. They were busy in Japan in the early 50s. And, they had they were not really involved in India at that stage. And they were confident the British would have their lingering impact on India for some time to come, because it's not that after, immediately after 47, the British left and there was no impact on it. So there was a lingering impact of the British, in the 50s. So the British policy on China in the early 50s was to recognize China. So Nehru was not alone. Nehru did not recognize China on his own. It was largely a Commonwealth policy which the Britain had initiated for recognition of China in the 1950s. Therefore, since there was a lingering influence on India, Nehru also moved along with largely the Commonwealth policy of recognition of China. America, of course, was not, because it was trying to put pressure on China. Basically, it wanted to break it away from Soviet Union. So largely the broad game was how to create the Sino-Soviet split. So in mid 50s, America starts taking more aggressive interest in Tibet. And there, if you see, India begins to align with America. We may not have been directly involved, but there were, Kalimpong and other places were being used by the Americans to conduct their affairs in Tibet, within Tibet. So we were aligned. So 57 to 62 was a golden period in Indo-American relations, because that is a time we were sort of aligned with. We were seeking their weapons. They were giving weapons. Nehru even wrote them a letter when the China problem happened, to really deliver them the weapons. So, so there was a big bonhomie between India and America from 62. When after Kennedy dies, then Lyndon Johnson changes his policy, and the whole thing. India takes a backseat in the American strategic, basically, map. So we are from there on. China is America, and America is chasing China, and America. I argue basically that America nudged India towards the Soviet Union. because it wanted to prove to China that Soviet Union is chasing these non-communist countries, and it is not really concerned about international communism, strengthening international communism. And it was basically giving this narrative to China that if you break away from India, it would, if you break away from Soviet Union, it's better because it's following its own nationalist policies. You need to follow your own nationalist policy, your own national interest, and your national interests are not in strengthening the international communism. So that was the basic premise, and it did not, it did not matter to them that India could get some things from Soviet Union or not. But in the long run, the whole, the structure, the communist structure, international communist structure, to break that was the ultimate aim of the American strategy. And I would suggest that 1962 war, if you see, played a big role in creating that kind of animosity between, and furthering the animosity between China and Soviet Union, because Soviet Union stood with us or remained neutral, and it irked China that Soviet Union had not really, completely supported it in the 1962 war. So in that sense, so we were a part of that larger American strategy. We gave support to Americans. It's just that the Americans went the other way later. So this factor still remains, and we are equally now committed because we see China as a big monster in the room, and so therefore the Indian elite is, or India as such, is largely, I would say, in support of having a strong relationship with America. Now you would come to the point that there are frictions. Like in any relationship, there are frictions and there are problems. America is a more demanding lover, I would say. It is never satisfied. After every thing that India gives, it would continue to say that I need more, I need more. And so you often find that there is a lot of problems, you find in the press itself, in the American media, there's lots against India which comes. And that, of course, is now related to the fact that the American press and a strong liberal lobby in America now feels that India has become an illiberal democracy, or it has become illiberal in the sense. So they give those liberal arguments in terms of freedom of speech, in terms of freedom of religion, and all those factors combined. India has become an electoral. So these are the complaints. These are the complaints of the Americans, basically. Similarly, you saw America complaining in terms of killing some or a plot, alleged plot to kill a Sikh Niger in America. Similarly, in Canada. So that is another factor which has come up, for which India is being blamed, by Americans, that this relationship, it'll impact this relationship badly if India does not sort of, quote unquote, behave properly. Now, India has been steadfast as of now in terms of, warding off these criticisms. But there is a growing nationalism in India, and that nationalism in India at the moment is supporting the relationship with America. Now, if you see actually, when this Ukraine war happened, India has taken a very independent stand in Ukraine war. America has been, against, a lot of Americans have commented why India has taken this kind of an independent stance, why India has taken India says that it is sheer pragmatism, that we would not spoil our relationship with Russia, and if possible, we will draw a lot of, cheap oil from Russia to build our own resources. So that is largely the Indian argument, because the world moves on basically national interests. and self-interest. So we will cater for our self-interest, and we will not make any value judgments on what Russia has done and what Russia has not done. So there are many, but America has basically reconciled to India's relationship with Russia. It agreed to even Russia supplying India S-400 defense systems. So they were by and large, they are happy with it, because they would be happy with it because Russia is not America's peer competitor. Let's remember that. America's peer competitor is China. So but if India was to behave similarly with China, I don't think America would accept that from India. And India has, for that matter, been playing a very balancing game. We are also a part of Quad. We are also a part of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. So it's not that we have abandoned that. But there, and India's argument is that if China has to be contained, India's presence in Shanghai also, India's presence in Central Asia is equally important. And even Russia would like to have India in that particular configuration, because it feels with India's presence, it would be easier for Russia to balance China in the region. So therefore, India plays a very crucial role even in that particular setting of SCO, because it doesn't really matter to America, because even America during the ongoing Ukraine war had been taking nuclear fuel from Russia, which was one of the important fuels for America. So it doesn't really mind India doing that, as long as India is committed to the Quad, fully committed to the Quad, and as long as India is committed to its relationship with America. So with this, I end my talk and I'm open to questions.
Thank you, sir, for your insightful talk. I believe there will be lots of questions. Please introduce yourself before asking question. Floor is.
Hello, I'm Paco from RSIS, Research Fellow at RSIS. Thank you for the very interesting talk. I had two quick questions. So you've been talking about America's peer competitor being China, not Russia. What's the official positioning of the Indian government regarding Taiwan? What do you think would happen in case of a major crisis in the Taiwan Strait? What would be India's position? That's my first question.
Shall I answer? Okay, I'll answer one by one because the audience is not. Now, as far as Taiwan is concerned, even America is not very clear. Its position is ambiguous. And so is India. India is not recognized Taiwan as a separate country, and nobody, not as America. Of course, when the as a part of the Quad, when you're preparing yourself, when you're exercising yourself along with your partners in that region, when the crisis erupts, you're basically preparing yourself for the crisis. So when the crisis erupt, India would also cross the bridge, when it comes. Before that, there is no point in making statements on that particular issue, I think, because it will aggravate the matters more. Because on one hand, if you see now, America is not talking of decoupling, but delinking with China, because there are constraints on American. Similarly, there are other Quad members also, which are, there is a thaw in kind of a relationship with China now. I'm not saying that it was not an adversarial relationship, but yet it is an adversarial relationship. Yet you are seeing a little bit of thaw in that relationship happening with Australia also. India also, the Prime Minister Modi has made a statement that we need to resolve the border issue because we feel because the delinking with China, absolute delinking with China is not yet possible. But if Taiwan crisis was to erupt, and I said that India would probably not take a stand as it has taken in the Ukraine war.
So my second question was more on a. So I come from a European country, France, and we hear a lot in Europe about what you just said: decoupling, de-risking, de-linking with China. So if you listen to the political discourse right now in France, India is our best friend, right? We sell jet fighters, now submarines. Nice. But if you look at the economic realities, the bilateral exchange with China is 6 times more than the bilateral exchange between India and France. And so apart from the military agreements, do you think the de-risking, decoupling, de-linking, whatever you call it, with China is possible? And can India benefit this decoupling with China? Or does it imply maybe India opening its economy a bit more to foreign investments? Because from what I hear, even from French companies here in Singapore, is that the Indian markets in many aspects is still closed, is still protectionist. So do you think to decouple from China, does it imply a more open Indian economy?
No, India, of course, decoupling from China is the process is on. I'm not saying, all Europe as well as America, even India finds India, ever since Galwan crisis in 2022, the Indian trade with China has increased. It's now about $125 billion. So decoupling from China for the global industry economy is very difficult at the moment. Europe finds it. Chinese cars, BYDs have taken over Europe like anything. Germany is worried. So are other countries worried. So it's not that the divide is not ideological this time. As America tried to create a divide between dictatorship and democracy, but it is difficult. But that's the Indian endeavor. When I said that when we are aligned with France, or when we are when we get close with America, our aim is to reach a stage to become an industrial power primarily. That industrial power would not be the third industrial revolution kind of an industrial power. Probably that boat we have missed. That's why our insistence on technology, our insistence on semiconductors. So we have a vision of becoming a fourth generation industrial power. That's what we are endeavoring. That's what would make us attractive. Of course, for us also, delinking from China is not important. If we want to become a $12 trillion economy by 2030, we need Chinese market. Chinese market is huge. So you can't just, it would be harming our national interest if we were to delink, just as, a lot of pressure is put on Europe in your relationship with China by America. But you can't afford to do that because it will harm you in the long run. Europe has been being impacted a great deal, I would say. Ukraine war has impacted a great deal. The closure of the Suez, the Red Sea crisis has created a lot of problems for the Europe. So therefore, the war is impacting, the all-around wars is impacting Europe more than any other part of the world, I would say. So that is the thing. So delinking from China is a little difficult at the moment, or decoupling, I would say, is a little difficult. But of course, there are, friends shoring. The process of friends shoring has started, and it will continue, I think, for a little more time. It will take time. Nothing can happen in international politics in a decade also. It will take more than a decade, I think.
My name is Pushpa. I work here as a researcher at ISAS. as you just said, economy-wide, it's difficult to ignore China by none of the countries globally, right? So is it just the military factor in terms of your presentation that China is a factor in Indo-US relations to contain China? So what does that containment actually entail? Is it just the military containment? Because economy wide, like every country has an interest, you can't stop that. You have to engage with China in some ways. So if it is just the military containment that you are looking at in terms of this strong relationship with India and China, India and the US at the moment, how far can this go? I mean, if there comes a time where India has to take a stand on this, how do you think India will deal with this when it is also looking at that economic growth through its engagement with China, and looking at its national interest?
In international politics, as I understand, military partnerships, when you build, are not just for wars. They also help you to sort of expand in other sectors. For example, military relationships are also formed to apply pressure. So this alliance itself, if you create an alliance like Indo-US military relationship, partnership, strategic partnership, it creates a kind of a pressure on China. It makes it react in ways that you would like it to react, like, or if you see the Galwan crisis which happened, a lot of people are saying that the way the Chinese aggression is largely because of the pressure that this relationship is creating on China. So it creates fears in the mind. So it is not just for one particular war. One particular war happens, then that decision would be taken. Like in late 40s, when India had become independent, it was very clear. Girija Shankar Vajpayee and even Nehru, for that matter, were very clearly, they said that if there was a war between Soviet Union and America, then we would side with America. Because that's again, I'm saying, because we were our entire relationship with the West was rooted in the liberal international order that they created, the post-war liberal. We were committed to that order. So our commitment was not to America. Our commitment was not to anyone else, but our commitment was to that order. So in case of a war with Soviet Union or America, India would have been with America. So that is the argument I'm making here. So here also, now, that's exactly I said, if you're preparing for a war, then when the war comes, the decision would be taken. There is no point in announcing the decision now, because there is no need for announcing the decision. Similarly, as far as delinking is concerned, we would continue to delink. We have been like sort of building our own capacities. The idea is to build your own capacities to reduce your dependency on China. And that process has started. There is a process which will again happen, and technology is also supporting that process. China was a beneficiary of the American deindustrialization process, or the European deindustrialization process, which started in the 80s, when actually, the Wall Street took over the American capitalism. And you saw that the manufacturers were all, relegated to the second position. So that is the time that China benefited by establishing the deindustrialization process in America or in the West, helped China and other countries. Now there is a reindustrialization process happening, aided by technology. You have robotics, you have AI now, which is supporting that process, and therefore that's why you now hear about terms like friendshoring, nearshoring. The supply lines are actually getting shortened now. So your dependence on how the world will shape up, because there may not be a need for a war exactly, just as there was not a need for a war between Soviet Union and America. So the international politics is playing its own game in a very different manner. So sometimes you do not really need a war exactly. You can create conditions, but the military is essential to create those conditions. Military pacts are important. Military, posturing is important at times in creating that kind of an atmosphere where you can make an adversary do the things that you want him to do without really firing a bullet.
Dr. Bharadwaj, my name is Vinod Rai. I'm a visiting scholar with the ISAS. Post the Ukraine war, the nearness of China with Russia seems to have got closer. On the one hand, India is helping Russia in buying crude, and of course, we are buying equipment from the US also. How do you think this is going to be playing out in the time to come? Because is it affecting? Because all of Europe protested when India started buying cheap crude from Russia. Americans also did, and there were talk about sanctions and all those things. Of course, nobody got into it, and we knew that sanctions would not apply. But how do you think it's going to play out in time to come, vis-a-vis India also, Russia and China getting close to each other?
Currently, if you see, India, one war with Ukraine war, India could not have just broken its ties with Russia. And, again, if you see, the maritime powers, which is America and the Anglo-American powers basically, and to some extent Europe, I feel this is a part of my present project at Prime Minister's Library now, where I am looking at the Eurasian connectivity, sir. The Eurasian, that is right from China and the entire Eurasian continent getting connected up through railroads, and how it is sort of impacting the world order. Now you have a situation when we talk in terms of China and Russia coming together, the Nord Stream pipeline getting broken. So there is a disruption of this particular, Eurasia. What is happening? Ukraine war has actually disrupted the route, which had started from China, extending up to Germany. So Ukraine war via Russia, Central Asia, Russia, and this thing. So this basically, the entire plan is, or the entire strategy, I would say, is to create a split, to create a split between China and Russia. And that's what the a lot of people like John Mearsheimer, the Americans, are saying, that if you create, by actually antagonizing Russia, you have brought Russia closer to China. And that is a negative strategy, they say. The whole issue is that if these powers are to combine, then the entire continent, the Eurasian continent, combines. And American maritime power hegemony basically rests on ensuring that these alternative routes do not become very, very effective. Now we are also getting involved in building alternative routes. We are trying to building routes from Israel through the Middle East, extending up to Gujarat. So all this is happening. We are doing this, basically creating alternative supply lines. In this Russia, that's exactly, I said, we cannot abandon Russia at this moment. You never know, Europe also may come around later accepting Russia. There are a lot of voices within Europe which would probably say that this entire war is impacting us more. And, because economically, if it starts harming them more, there are voices which will gain momentum even in Europe then. So therefore, American aim at the moment, I don't know, is why they are not, letting Russia basically get closer and closer to China, because that does not really help this long-term strategy at all. Of course, if they are thinking that by creating, by indulging Russia in this long-term war, if they're going to weaken Putin, or say Putin weakens himself through this war, then of course there will be no option left for Russia but to come to the West. A weakened Russia would sort of come to the West. That could be one of the expectations of the Americans. So, but the larger, I think the strategic plan would be to create a wedge between China and Russia. That was the larger strategy in the Cold War, because if sort of a communist supply line had run right from China up to Poland, the communist countries would not have been dependent at all on the maritime routes, which were controlled by America. So, which split actually ensured that also, not only the ideological split, but it also ensured the split in the Eurasian connectivity.
But wouldn't the risk be that a weakened Russia would, considering what NATO is doing to Russia, a weakened Russia will fall back on China?
A weakened Russia, then China basically, then China becomes too powerful, which Russia would not like. Then the West would offer Russia something else, probably. A weakened Russia. At the moment, Russia is very nationalistic. At the moment, Russia under Putin, but who knows after Putin what happens? And Putin and everybody has got a shelf life.
Oh, my name is Joshua and I'm a student. So my question is regarding BRICS. So I know that the India and US, they have very close relations, right? So, but like India being part of BRICS puts everyone in a bit of an awkward position because BRICS is largely conceived as a anti-Western bloc or anti-Western somewhat of an organization. So I have two questions. My first question is, what is India's national interest in being part of BRICS? And the second thing is, so far, I think we haven't really seen anything very substantive that BRICS have achieved or any substantive outcomes. So in the next 10 to 15 years, do you think that BRICS will produce any substantive outcomes that may change perhaps the global world order? Yeah, that's my questions.
BRICS is an important, because most of these emerging economies have now become powerful economically in that sense, the members of the BRIC, and BRICS is expanding and India is playing its role in expanding. As I said, India is also part of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. India is also part of the BRICS. India is also leading the Global South movement as such. So India is also trying to integrate the Global South into the mainstream international politics. So India is leading the way in that sense. It does not want to give the entire space to China. If India is competing with China in the international political arena, then by not being a part of these organizations, we cannot give that entire space to China. Because these organizations are important for international growth, international economy, international peace. So if China was to hegemonize everything, which it is capable of, that would be counterproductive for India. So it is good for India to engage with these organizations rather than break out of them.
Yeah, so do you think that BRICS would produce any substantive outcomes in the next 10 years or 15 years time?
If BRIC grows, it will bring what substantial outcome would you like? Growth of contributions to the world economy. If BRICS is making, that itself is a substantial contribution, I would say. If it is contributing to the growth of technology, it is a substantial contribution that the BRICS is making. The emerging economies are making. And integrating the other actors, other small actors in the global economy is another contribution. Contribution, we generally think in terms of war and peace only. Of course, if you become a strong bloc, then you're able to negotiate peace better. You may not participate in war, but then you become important to negotiate peace in that sense. So any bloc is important.
If you look at South Asia, mainly to meet the Chinese challenge, US is there, India is there. But don't you think that after a period of time, with the spread of US strength in South Asia, in a small country in South Asia, we have US Maldives defense deal, US strong presence in growing presence in Nepal. That will certainly going to affect the India's strategic or India's influence in the region. If you look at during the Cold War, India used to keep foreign powers away from the Indian Ocean region and the Bay of Bengal, especially. What do you state?
No, as far as India keeping them away, China was not interested earlier. When it was growing during the Cold War, China was not interested in South Asia as such because it did not have the capacity to, reach out to. Now it has the capacity. It has the industrial capacity to reach out. It has the railways capacity to reach out. It can build that kind of an infrastructure in a very short time period, and it has shown already. So therefore, its presence has already grown. Whether it is you take Bhutan or you take Nepal or even Maldives, the recent example. Although when our Prime Minister made a statement that we should stop our tourism to Maldives, 40% of our Indian tourists have gone now. I was reading in the newspaper, but 400% Chinese have increased, over there. So they have the capacity, they have the money now, and they have basically the infrastructure to reach out to. They will reach out. But so that's where India is now. The whole endeavor is to become a big power. You can't big power just by being a military power. You have to be an industrial power. You have to be an economic power. And only when you are an economic power, then you will be able to attract others. America has attracted so many people. Europe has attracted other countries basically because of their economic power. And then you can also sell your arms to them. Then you become attractive. So idea is to become more attractive. Idea is to become more, I would not say powerful, but more attractive. And then only your soft power also works, because your soft power cannot work without economic strength.
So no more questions, I think.
Yeah. So on behalf of the Institute of South Asian Studies, we would like to extend a thanks to Dr. Atul and Dr. Ranjan for the insightful and engaging event. Thank you, and we look forward to seeing all of you in our upcoming events. Have a good day.
Thank you so much for inviting me.